quite a beginning, wasn't it? Wow. If that wasn't visionary and expanding your mind in terms of the possibilities, I don't know what is. But for me, it was quite amazing to hear our three speakers this morning and the different visions that they have. We're transitioning now, as you can tell, and we're actually going to be talking about a partnership, a real partnership that's in the Philippines between the government and the private sector. So I'm going to be handing over to my colleague Beth Porter, who is the policy advisor for UNCDF and the Better Than Cash Alliance. Beth will be moderating this panel based on her over 20 years of experience in financial inclusion across the globe, and both working with the Philippines in the range of different capacities. You will be introducing our two speakers, so I better get off the platform and hand over to you, Beth. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Beth. Public-private partnerships are critical to achieving digital financial inclusion. And while we may all agree on this, there are a number of barriers to overcome in making this successful. We are lucky today, quite privileged today, to have both His Excellency Ambassador Jose Cuisia, Ambassador of the Philippines to the United States, and from representing the private sector, Mr. Paolo Baltao, who is President of G-Xchange. His Excellency Ambassador Cuisia was nominated by President Benigno Aquino III and confirmed in his role as ambassador in February 2011. Prior to his appointment, Ambassador Cuisia was the Commissioner of Social Security. He was also Central Bank Chairman, Chairman of the Monetary Board, and concurrently Chairman of the Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation. He was also President and CEO Administrator of the Social Security Administration and the Director of the Philippine National Bank. So if his credentials as ambassador were not enough to have him up on the stage here today, I think you have all heard he's eminently, has a lot of eminent experience in this area. To my right, Mr. Paolo Baltao is president of G-Xchange, which is a subsidiary of Globe Telecom, one of the leading telecommunications service providers in the Philippines. G-Xchange pioneered the revolutionary model in cardless and cashless mobile commerce service that many of you may have heard of called Gcash. Prior to, and this was launched in October of 2004. Prior to leading G-Xchange as president, he served in the capacity of leading the Global Product Group, international remittances, banking business, financial and government services, and so he has a lot of experience in all branches of G-Xchange business. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Cuisia and Mr. Baltao. So allow me, before we start the discussion, to provide a little bit of context. In the Philippines, nearly a third of the nearly 97 million people in the Philippines are living below the poverty line. 73% of them do not have access to a formal bank account. Interestingly, though, over 100% of the there's over 100% mobile penetration in the Philippines, though, as we'll hear later, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has a phone. Given the low level of financial infrastructure in the country, the opportunity is great to go digital in order to provide financial services in the Philippines. It was, the government of the Philippines, as many of you know, is extremely proactive in financial inclusion. And indeed, in its Maya Declaration, it has stated the goal that every Filipino will have access to a formal deposit account. It's in this context that the Pantawid Pamilyang Filipino program, that's the 4 Ps, was developed as a government-owned conditional cash transfer program. And it targets poor households with either a pregnant mother or households with children up to 14 years of age. The program's primary goals are to alleviate poverty with a particular focus on health and education. When payment providers were invited to participate through a competitive selection process, G-Xchange was the first mobile network operator to do so. Given that that many of the program beneficiaries do not have mobile phones, and recall that even though there's 100%, a supposed 100% coverage, many of the poorer Filipinos and those living in more remote areas do not have phones, G-Xchange had to significantly adapt its model to provide payment services. So that brings us to one of the elements that is so interesting about this partnership is that it's still in the stage of digitizing these cash payments. So there's much that we can learn from the ambassador and Mr. Baltao. So let me turn now to the discussion and start with Your Excellency. Perhaps you could tell us what were the government policies behind the decision to partner with the private sector for the delivery of conditional cash transfers.
Thank you, Beth, for giving a brief introduction about the conditional cash transfer program of the Philippines. I guess the major goal or the overarching goal of the government was poverty alleviation. And one important policy to achieve this goal was policy of inclusive growth within a framework of good governance. We needed to ensure that the gains of our robust economic growth would lead to shared prosperity. If looking at the last 2.5 years, our growth rates have been among the highest in Southeast Asia and even in Asia. In 2012, we achieved a 6.6% GDP growth rate. The first half of this year, we had a 7.6% GDP growth rate. Yet the economic benefits have not trickled down to the lowest income groups. As you mentioned, almost a third of the population still live below the poverty threshold. So the president has actively promoted his policy of inclusive growth. And this CCT program, in effect, tries to alleviate poverty by providing monthly cash allowances for the poorest of the poor families. It targets about 5.2 million families. So far, they've reached about 3.9 million families, and the target is by 2016, all 5.2 million families would have been reached. They provide monthly allowances for as long as the children and family are in school at least 85% of the whole school year, and that they visit the rural clinics regularly. This has resulted in much better health for the children as well as much better attendance at school. So this has contributed to improved education, improved health. So the CCT is really a vehicle to deliver services by helping the most vulnerable families to ensure that they are able to send their children to school to attain the kind of education they need because we believe that education is the best way for them to get out of poverty. So we initially used cash cards for this program, but partnering with the private sector was a logical step to make the program more efficient and to achieve cost efficiencies. The program then was facing distribution challenges in areas where there were no banks or cash machines, and so government had to find creative solutions by partnering with the private sector, in this case, G-Xchange.
Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing with us the government's development objectives and reasons to partner with the private sector. I'll now turn to you, Mr. Baltao, and ask you, what were the key drivers for you to engage with the government in this conditional cash transfer program, particularly when some of your other competitors weren't so eager to make this move?
Well, thank you, Beth. It would be hard-pressed for a conditional cash transfer program to be successful if the beneficiaries fulfill their end of their obligations, but they get paid way after they have done their obligations, at least maybe a year or 3/4 after. So we saw the challenges that were being experienced. Number one, they're not getting paid on time. During disbursements, it will take them until 2 o'clock in the morning to get paid. If they get paid their $80 cash grant, $20 is spent on transportation alone. Before the disbursements get reconciled by head office, and which is a prerequisite for succeeding disbursements, it would take a month. Looking at all these issues, we strongly believe that our platform would be able to address these issues. And in November of 2010, we did a pilot with the DSWD. We did 10,000 disbursements. Previously, they were disbursing until 2 p.m. Money had to be brought in by helicopter. There were political undertones in the disbursement, as you know. If the poorest of the poor get their money and the politician is there, 1 + 1 together equals the elections, all right? So we came in, we disbursed for 10,000 beneficiaries. We did it, we finished at 2 o'clock. Not 2 o'clock in the morning, but 2 o'clock in the afternoon, okay? We did 10,000 beneficiaries. By the next month, the DSWD requested us to pay out the backlog for that past year. And in 2011, from 10,000 in November 2010, we did 2.5 million disbursements in 2011. And from that time on, disbursements were given on time. The transportation cost were now dropped to $2 at most for beneficiaries. And by the way, when the beneficiary gets the cash grant, head office, the DSWD head office, already knows that the payment has been made. So reconciliation and settlement is instantaneous. So to us, the benefit of using our infrastructure was very evident. From our end as well, we believed, look, we are a telco saying that we are engaging into financial services, okay? Banks enjoy the fiduciary role of being trusted with your money. With this bigger scale of a project, we felt that by coming into this project, we will gain the credibility that our system is reliable, credible, and really can be trusted by the public.
Thank you. Ambassador, one of the things that I think so impresses us about the dynamic that's happening in the Philippines is the great leadership and partnership between different government bodies. So this initiative was led by the Department of Social Welfare, but the Department of Budget and Management is involved. There's also been great leadership on the part of the central bank in the Philippines. As a former central bank governor, what is your perspective or what can you imagine is the perspective of the central bank in terms of the benefits for citizens of the Philippines?
Well, we're very fortunate that our central bank is quite progressive, and it's been the policy of the central bank to try to get the banks to expand their customer base, to make sure that they make it as easy as possible for individuals to open bank accounts. But as you said earlier, 73% of the population do not have bank accounts. So the central bank has been trying to promote financial literacy by providing a lot of these seminars, both by themselves and through the banking system. We have about 42 commercial bank and probably about 800 to 900 development banks. We have about 200 savings banks. So there's quite a large banking network. And the banks are being encouraged to precisely bring in more people. Now, with this electronic payments, there's going to be more of an incentive for the individuals to learn more about banking, become part of the financial system, and we see the central bank, in fact, taking a very active role in promoting digital financial inclusion. They have also been providing incentives even to non-banks like G-Xchange, because normally the regulators like the central bank would only focus on banks and not provide the incentives to non-banks, because they regulate the banks, they do not regulate the non-banks like G-Xchange. So, but I think in this particular case, they see the advantages of government partnering with the private sector, and this is why they have been more open to non-banks participating in this payment system.
Great, thank you. Well, we've heard some of the, from the perspective of the government and the central bank, the orientation towards providing the citizens of the Philippines with better financial inclusion. From your perspective with G-Xchange, what have you learned about the clients in particular that you're using in the kinds of services you're providing to enable you to address some of the challenges that you've encountered in implementing this conditional cash transfer program?
Well, they did appreciate, not having to line up until 2 o'clock in the morning. They did appreciate getting paid on time. I'm sure any beneficiary would appreciate getting paid on time after sending my kids to school and fulfilling the obligations. The challenges that we encountered with the program were only felt initially. One would be scheduling. We were informed in the eagerness of the DSWD to pay out the backlog and to pay out the cash grants. They scheduled payouts in about 2 days, and we had 2 days to mobilize resources. But that was just initially, because in the succeeding payouts, we were now able to really plot out the schedules. Another would be, the Philippines is really geographically challenged. All right, there are areas for the poorest of the poor wherein you have to travel 10 hours by land and 5 hours by boat, and that boat only leaves once a week. Okay, there are also other areas wherein you travel by 3 days by boat. Okay, it's not a yacht; it's a boat. All right. There are areas which they called Turtle Islands, which is in the southernmost point of the Philippines. There are even areas which we cannot even find in the map, but it was existing. So these are the challenges that we encountered, together with some challenges on security. You had bandits. Look, knowing that there's only one trip itinerary for a boat, on one schedule, I'm sure it's very, very obvious when the bandits will start waiting for the payouts to happen. So that was obviously a challenge, bringing in millions of pesos to an area where you don't have that much security is really a skill in itself, trying to figure out how to maneuver and how to make sure that the payouts happen. But overall, these are only felt initially. And, when the succeeding payouts happened, with a flick of all right, we say the SWD provides us a schedule. Lo and behold, the payout happens on time, and everybody's happy. It's a win-win situation for everybody.
Great, thank you. Well, this is the moment to ask both of you to provide some of your accumulated wisdom and share some of the lessons learned, recommendations for some of the governments who are represented here today. And so I'll first turn to you, Ambassador, if you could share what are some of the key messages that you might have for other governments as they embark on a digitization process.
Thank you, Beth. First, I'd say get started right away. It's important for governments to create a policy environment that encourages digital financial inclusion. Philippine regulators already allow digital platforms that can be leveraged by government and private sectors in delivering services, transacting with their partners and the general public. Second is to create more opportunities for public-private partnerships. We are fortunate to have high mobile penetration, as you said, close to 100%, and companies like G-Xchange, represented by Paolo here, that offer creative solutions that are accessible to the poor. And third, as a founding member of the Alliance for Financial Inclusion and one of the original members of the Better Than Cash Alliance, our experience shows that digitizing is a valuable tool for fostering greater transparency and security in financial transactions, particularly in government. Together with other founding states and organizations, the Philippines reaffirms its commitment to implement digitization reforms and cashless solutions in pursuit of better governance and ultimately inclusive growth.
Thank you very much. Mr. Baltao, I'll turn to you. What are the secrets you would have to share with governments on with the private sector?
I thought you were going to make me share my secrets of my competitors, but
no trades.
for the government. Private companies like the telecommunications companies invest a lot in technology. We breathe innovation 24 hours a day. That's what we do. And the benefits of this can really be reaped by the government itself, with all these programs, all the things that they do. And the government need not worry about the commercials, which is normally what any other private company would also worry about. But what we're after is cost efficiency. And we believe that we can provide value to the government, and not because we charge a higher rate. No, it doesn't normally follow that we're always after profit. We believe that at a reasonable margin, we can provide a much better service. We can provide a more cost-efficient service, which would benefit not only the private sector, but obviously the government as well. So, the Philippine government has embarked on the PPP, which is a public-private partnership, and that's very commendable. A lot of projects now are moving. The government is now benefiting from, economies of scale, and as well access to the latest technology that the private sector can bring in.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador Cuisia and Mr. Baltao, for sharing with us some of your experiences in forging an effective partnership to advance digital financial inclusion. Thank you.
Okay.